We begin this news hour in Ukraine, where a sustained barrage of Russian missiles has struck cities across the country and left at least 9 people dead. Energy infrastructure was once again targeted. The Kremlin says it launched the missiles in retaliation for an attack in the Bryansk region last week. Air raid sirens sounded before dawn in 13 Ukrainian regions. More than 80 missiles were launched. Most of the deaths were in the western region of Lviv. Other areas hit include the capital Kyiv, the Black Sea port of Odessa, and Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. Confirming the assault, Russia said it used Kinzhal hypersonic missiles, a weapon Ukraine says it can't intercept.
During the first strike, the automated signal went on. I approached the window to see what is going on when I saw fiery sparks and windows were blown out in the entire house.
Well, Ukraine says the strikes cut electricity into the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. The head of the UN's nuclear watchdog, Rafael Grossi, is demanding urgent action to avoid a potential disaster at Europe's biggest plant. Ukraine now says the power supply to the plant has been restored.
Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is running on emergency diesels. The last line of defense. This is the 6th time. Let me say it again. This is the 6th time that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has lost all off-site power and has had to operate in this emergency mode. Let me remind you, this is the largest nuclear power station in Europe, operating for the 6th time under emergency diesel generators. What are we doing? How can we sit here in this room this morning and allow this to happen? This cannot go on. I am astonished by the complacency. Yes, the complacency. What are we doing to prevent this from happening? We are the IAEA. We are meant to care about nuclear safety. Each time we are rolling a dice. And if we allow this to continue time after time, then one day our luck will run out. I call on everyone in this room today and elsewhere. We must commit to protect the safety and security of the plant, and we need to commit now. What we need is action, and we know what this means. I will continue my urgent consultations and contacts to protect the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Please support me. Thank you very much.
And that's Rafael Grossi, the head of the UN's nuclear watchdog. Well, for more on this, let's speak to Arise correspondent Laurie Laird, who's been monitoring events around Ukraine from London. Good to see you, Laurie. What's the latest assessment of the extent of this Russian attack and the damage?
I think the first thing to look at is Zaporizhzhia, that nuclear power plant, particularly after those absolutely chilling comments that we heard from Rafael Grossi, the head of the IAEA. I can tell you that that plant is no longer running on diesel power. It is running on its own power. The problem was that when it was running on diesel power, the power that went to the cooling apparatus was uncertain. It's not entirely clear how long that diesel generation will last for. And I just think that these comments from Rafael Grossi are so utterly chilling. And we saw his comments earlier, but he wants to get this message across. He has done the rounds on every TV station, every English language station across the world today. He really wants to get this message across that if anything is sacred, anything should not be hit in this war, it is nuclear power plants.
Well, I mean, as you said, it's clearly a worrying situation, but what are the risks of hitting that plant?
This is interesting, and he has been asked this a couple of times, and his answer was, I'm not entirely sure. It's the sort of risk that we will not know how bad it is until it actually happens. He said, on a range of 1 to 10, I cannot tell you. But the point that I do want to make is this isn't a problem with nature like Fukushima that could not have been avoided. This could be, if there's any disaster to come out of this, it is man-made, and we cannot assess right now exactly how grave the damage could be, but because it's preventable, let's do something to prevent that. He did say that that diesel generation will eventually run out if power to those cooling plants is deprived for any length of time. He has said this is the 6th time we are going to run out of luck. But what a disaster could look like, he was unable to define, simply because, Charles, it would be unprecedented.
Well, absolutely. And Laurie, the Ukrainians are saying that Moscow fired at least 6 of its hypersonic Kinjal missiles, which Ukraine has no way of shooting down. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has regularly touted these as weapons for which NATO also has no answer. What do we know about these missiles?
Interesting question, Charles. And I can tell you that the Russian Defense Ministry also seems to have said via the Telegram messaging platform that they did use some of those hypersonic missiles. And the reason that they are so frightening is because they travel so quickly. They travel at a low altitude. They're very maneuverable. So they're difficult to pick up on radar, much less shoot down. Now, the powers that have been supplying Ukraine with anti-aircraft and defense systems have said that the Patriot missiles that come from the U.S. maybe can shoot down these hypersonic missiles. The Ukrainians have said, well, we're going to have to see that in practice before we believe that. Now, apparently there were 6 of these used today. That is the most that we have seen in any single attack. And I think this will really accelerate and really heighten the discussion that Ukraine is having with Western powers about defense systems. Now, a couple of months ago, the feeling was that Russia did not have that many of these hypersonic missiles in its arsenals. And many people are saying that because this big, wide-ranging attack today came after a break, it's the biggest attack that we've seen since the end of January, many are wondering if Russia is starting to run out of munitions, including these hypersonic missiles, and perhaps that's why there was a gap in these very, very big attacks. If that is the feeling, it might be more difficult for Ukraine to get more defense, more munitions, more armory out of Western powers.
And of course, Laurie, this has become a pattern throughout this war, hasn't it? That every so often Russia launches a countrywide missile and drone strike on Ukraine with devastating consequences.
And many analysts are wondering about this, these heavy attacks and then a break, heavy attacks and then a break. And they're wondering what that says about Russia's supply of munitions. And I think there'll be a lot of speculation in the days and weeks to come about how much armory Russia actually has. I think that will also lead to discussions about whether Russia will lobby harder for China for some kind of military supply. And I think given the severity of this attack, given that a nuclear power plant was involved, I also suspect that this will amplify Ukraine's call for more armory, including fighter jets.
Laurie, thanks very much indeed. Laurie Laird, a RISE correspondent, talking to me there about developments around Ukraine. And she is, of course, monitoring those developments.